If somebody wanted to start a podcast tomorrow, what is one piece of advice you'd give them?
Stay with it.
Heard. What's going on, everybody? My name is Hassiem Muhammad, and you are listening to The Actor's Instrument, where we discuss the essential qualities you need to stand out in the entertainment industry. Nowadays, artists of all types are exploring a variety of mediums in order to move their careers forward, to stay creatively fulfilled, and to secure employment. One such medium is the one you're listening to, podcasts. And this week's guest on The Actor's Instrument is a theater actor who has amassed over 10 million downloads on his podcast network, and he's here to show us how the sauce is made. Michael Goodfriend is an actor who's appeared in classic and contemporary plays at theaters across the country and in numerous world premieres of plays by outstanding contemporary American playwrights. He has performed internationally at the National Theater of Korea in Seoul and was a member of the Brooklyn-based Irondale Ensemble Project, where he wrote Wasted, a noir-style thriller about the demise of public education in the United States. Wow, that just felt real. Okay, he has also performed on television and in several independent films. Now, as far as podcasting is concerned, Michael first made his foray into the world of podcasting as a freelance producer with ETV and AOL in 2005. The same year, the New Oxford American Dictionary chose podcast as the word of the year. He collaborated on the development of Air American Radio, where he produced The Majority Report, and as the executive producer of Left Jab on Sirius XM Radio, he wrote, directed, and produced over 400 episodes of this popular political talk show. Michael is currently the head of scripted fiction at Next Chapter Podcasts, and we met on one of their projects, a production of Timon of Athens that I was cast in and that we literally just wrapped recording last week. Michael, thank you so much for joining me.
Hassiem, it's a pleasure. Great to be on your show.
Woo, here we go. So, Michael, after working with you on Timon of Athens, it just kind of struck me out. Well, I said to you, I was like, well, one, I just want to talk to you more about podcasting and what you guys are doing in Next Chapter. And then I also realized, as an actor who has a podcast, I've never had another guest on the show who's an actor with a podcast. So I feel like this would just be a real cool opportunity for our listeners. If anybody's interested in exploring the world of podcasting or just curious about what podcasting could do for their career, I figured nobody better than you.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk to you.
Cool. Could you tell us a bit about what Next Chapter Podcasts is and your role there?
Sure. Next Chapter Podcast is an independent podcast production company. My friend Jeremiah Tittle founded it about, now it's probably about 6-7 years ago. And he worked with me. I worked with him. He was our engineer at Sirius XM Radio when I was doing that show that you mentioned called Left Jab. And he was just brilliant at his job. Really, really good, quick on his feet. We needed somebody like that who could kind of roll with the punches and, do up my little comic sketches that I would write 30 seconds before we went to air, and enhance them with sound effects, things like that. I'd kept up with him, of course, after that show wrapped. I was busy as a stage actor, and I was raising 2 small kids. I was living in Oregon at the time, working at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, when I caught wind of the fact that he was starting his own podcast production company. And fast forward a couple of years, the pandemic hit. And kind of simultaneously with this, I was, I was talking to a friend of mine who had been an actor, became a writer, a guy named Kevin Henderson. And I got to take it back even a step further. Another friend of mine, an actor named Tony Dalton, who's probably best known for Better Call Saul. He plays Lalo. He wanted to do a show with me, a stage show, somewhere in New York. This was pre-pandemic, and I said, look, I'll see what I can do. I'll see if I can find a writer who's got a new play for a two-hander. So that had gotten me in touch with my friend Kevin, who I mentioned, who had a play that he wanted to make into a podcast. And that was, now we're in the pandemic, everybody was doing things for, podcasts because there was
Hmm.
no other way to do anything.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, my buddy Jeremiah has this independent podcast production company. At the time, it was called Native Creative Podcasts. And I put them together. And, in conversation, it came up that, like, hey, not only do I want to do Kevin's play as a podcast, do it as
Hmm.
the podcast series, um, but Jeremiah said I need somebody to head up scripted fiction. We had this long work history, he and I,
Hmm.
through that show, Left Jab, and I was like, "Hey, man, absolutely, I'll be your head of scripted fiction." And one thing led to another, and we got the Play On podcast going, and I've now, you've mentioned I'm an actor and that I've done these other things, but since the pandemic, I have been working just solely on podcasting. And
Ah.
it's been something that I have become a huge champion of as a vehicle for actors. Both,
Hmm.
in what you're doing, I think what, sort of journaling the artist's experience, the actor's experience, and also just as a, form of creative self-expression, uh, and, getting actors in tune with just how meaningful the spoken word can be, you know, without visuals.
Yeah.
Obviously, visual entertainment is the main thing, but to go back to something, so basic as like, I speak, you listen, you imagine, we create a world together. I think that is something very, very powerful. So this is all a long way around saying, what is Next Chapter Podcast? Next Chapter Podcast got its name when I joined. And I was like, Native Creative is a nice name, but it had originated from uh, the company being a services company, a company that took organic advertising and basically branded entertainment. Um,
Hmm.
and when I came in and we were going to open it up to scripted fiction, I said, Native Creative is there. First of all, the connotations of the name, we don't want to pretend to be something. We don't want to be appropriative, in
Sure.
any way either. Let's not put a play on words with that phrase,
Sure.
native and
Sure.
creative. And we did this long brainstorming session. It took days. Me and everybody working for the company at the time, and we came up with this. It was actually Tracy Kaplan, who was um, one of the main partners in the original inception of the company, came up with the name Next Chapter, and that's been our name ever since. Next Chapter Podcast. Now we're a mix of all of those things. We do talk, we do branded content, we do services, and we do, thank goodness, scripted entertainment as well. So we're all of those things, and we got a lot of balls in the air. We take pitches, we consider projects, and then we initiate and try to own our IP as well.
Nice. Nice. Man, so many things there. One, this being born out of the pandemic for you. That's when I started
Mm-hmm.
my show.
Haha.
Starting it. Oh wait, just kidding. This
Oh,
was not this show. Sorry, that's unclear. I did this web series. I produced a web series during the pandemic. Um, that I wrote, produced, co-directed. Um, and it was kind of born out of that moment of what do we do?
mm-hmm.
And as a young actor, I was like, I'm the kind of person that I don't like to let the grass grow beneath my feet.
Yeah.
you know? So I was like, let's make something happen. And so
Yep.
we did. And then during the strike is when I started this show, this podcast, because
Gotcha.
it was another moment of what do we do?
Yeah.
Theaters are still reeling from the pandemic. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like every few months we hear about another theater shuttering its doors, which is really sucks to see and hear. But how can we take our careers into our own hands has always been something that I'm a huge champion of. Even if like you try something and it doesn't work, you know what I'm saying? Like
Yep.
just try because you could sit around and wait forever for people to bring you work and to do things. But look at you, like stage actor for all these years. And now you're in a position where your career is in your hands.
Yeah,
And
that's really true.
yeah.
I couldn't agree more, Hassiem, and I think that it's so essential, especially young actors starting out today. Really, as an I've taught as an actor, I've taught students at NYU and at
Mhm.
SOU in Oregon and, community colleges all over and I always tell young folks who are interested in acting or in theater, "Yeah, go do it, pursue it, do everything you can to make it happen, and learn everything you can along the way." Don't take anything for granted. Don't take any relationships for granted. Don't take any information for granted. Really learn about all the things you can in what it takes to create a piece of art, whether
Mhm.
it's film, television, a stage play. What does it take to produce it? Get 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 good at as many different things as you can along the way while you're pursuing that thing, because you just don't know when those tools are going to come in handy and
Yep.
when those connections are going to come in handy. And the more of a multi hyphenate you can be, especially now in this very, very precarious world that we're in, the
Mhm.
more skills you have, the more tools you have in your chest, the better able you'll be to survive a life in the arts.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, into how to make podcasting relatively successful, we worked on a play on podcast production of Timon of Athens.
Hmm.
And just to be clear, Next Chapter Podcasts is a parent company. Underneath that, there's different shows,
That's
and
right.
one of those is the Play On series,
That's right.
where you all do audio plays of Shakespeare.
Yep.
Now, I it's so impressive to me that you've generated a show around Shakespeare because I mean, obviously we as actors like have classically trained actors have a reverence for Shakespeare's work. Um, but you think about today's audience and it seems like there's possibly a disconnect there. I know for a fact many theaters struggle to get people to show up to see classical work. So what made you choose Shakespeare as the crux for this series?
Well, it was several things. I would say that number one, I had been working at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, and I knew about the Play on Shakespeare initiative that had been taken on by Louis Douthit, who was a dramaturg and head of new
Mm,
play development at uh, Oregon Shakespeare Festival for a time. I knew, I had been cast as an actor in these readings of these Shakespeare translations is what they were calling them.
mhm,
That is taking Shakespeare's plays, putting them in the hands of contemporary American playwrights, majority, minority, and women playwrights. That is the scope of the work. Most of the playwrights that were hired for this commission of translating all of these plays, all the plays in the canon, all 36 of Shakespeare's plays, the majority were women and minorities, people of color.
nice.
And um, so I had been cast in readings of them, and you know, it's no secret. I've said this in many interviews and that I've conducted and that I've been in. I was no big fan of this. I had
Mm,
absolutely loved Shakespeare's poetry and thought that the structure and everything, the original words are not to be tampered with. It's our job as artists to interpret them and make them clear to the audience.
mhm,
Uh, but I will say that when I started doing these readings, I noticed that there was an immediacy to some of these translations that made the audience really kind of lean in.
mhm,
You didn't have to do as much to get certain things across. And what I had the thing that kind of I think was the thing that tipped it over to my full embrace of the project was during the pandemic, we did all these Zoom. You might remember, you may have been casting them yourself, Hassiem.
yeah, yeah, I
Yeah,
did one of
yeah.
Timon of Athens with Andy. Yeah.
Okay, so Zoom presentations of these plays, and man, that was really, really excruciating. I mean, they were bad. That was bad. I
Uh,
don't care how good the actors were or the you know, Zoom was not conducive to theater. It's really
No.
hard to, do anything that is exciting or immediate or captivating. And
Or
so,
anything that relies on a verse, rhythm,
yes, because of the
structure.
overlap and the
Y
delay and all of
yeah.
that. And so, when I started, this whole new phase of life working as in scripted fiction for podcasts, I just went, you know what? There are all of those plays that have been translated by Play on Shakespeare that have this sense of immediacy that
Mhm,
would work really, really well as podcasts, where
mhm.
we can not try to do them in some sort of, quasi theatrical way with Zoom, but we really just go into the audio only and can really, really dig in and serialize them, make them short enough for the average podcast listener to, listen and move on,
Yeah.
uh, and uh, and also, give them this sort of because the translations give them a real sort of satisfying experience hearing things. Yes, the structure of the plays are intact. The lines are intact as they were written in terms of like meter and length and whatnot. The
Mhm.
words, some of the words are changed.
Yeah.
And I think it really does help to hear that, understand that these words on their face, yeah, you need to listen a couple of times to really get the story because they are complicated. They are challenging. But that was really the event for me. And being in the world of podcasts and kind of digging in and hearing so much scripted entertainment, I thought, okay, this everybody's talking about this as this new medium. It's not a new medium. This is radio. It's just radio without a lot of
It
restrictions. You know what I mean?
yeah,
There's no restrictions on time. There's no restrictions on
like content
how
advisory or
right.
yeah.
And so I thought to myself, what better place to begin a scripted fiction enterprise with a production company than with the stories that have absolutely stood the test of time. Let's go to
Mhm,
the beginning. We're not going back to the ancient Greeks, but we're going to Shakespeare. And there isn't a writer alive today who doesn't, in some way, has not been influenced by Shakespeare. There's not an
mhm.
actor, a professional actor alive today that hasn't had some experience with Shakespeare. So I thought to myself that there will be an audience. I don't know how big this audience will be. I don't know how far we'll be able to get this out to people. But as long as there's literature, as long as there's interest in storytelling, there's going to be a niche in there that
Yeah.
is going to appreciate Shakespeare. You can start with the people that love Shakespeare. That's a very small group of people, right? You can but then from there, you go to the people that have been influenced by or appreciate Shakespeare in some way, actors, right? All of us who've done formal training. Uh,
Mhm.
and then there are those people that are, the podcast kind of bookworm types, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Those people that like epic storytelling. And
Mm.
if you can connect those dots, you're going to have a decent sized audience. I told the folks that started Play on Shakespeare, I said, we probably won't reach anywhere near 1 million downloads, which is sort of a magic number for an episode if you want to turn like to a revenue positive model.
Sure.
I said, we're not going to get 1 million downloads for 10 years. Well, amazingly, we crossed the 1 million download threshold in 2 years, 2
Mm.
million in 3 years, and now we're off to the races. We're
Wow.
close to 10.
That's man, that's so incredible. Okay, so let's talk about you just described kind of identifying your audience for
Mhm.
this series. I know one of the struggles with any content creator, whether it be in podcasting or YouTube or even social media, is not just identifying the audience, but finding, like literally finding them and making sure they are aware of your content.
Yeah.
What strategies have you all employed, whether it be with Play On or some of your scripted fiction work as well, to make sure that you can tap into that audience, um, and get those, million downloads so that it could be a profitable business?
Yeah. Well, we've done a little bit of everything. I
Mhm.
like to say, and Jeremiah Tittle, our founder, likes to say, we've failed at almost everything, but we found a few things that succeed. You know what I
Nice.
mean? And that's the thing. You want to try everything you can, and there's no way to do this without spending some money, right? You got to
For
pay
sure.
for it. So we did paid advertising, we did Google ads, we do programmatic advertising, we do all of those things. But I would say when it comes to podcasts, the number one most effective and productive way of getting your podcast out is cross promotions. So finding those podcasts that have some sort of uh, affinity, to
Mhm.
whatever your content is, right?
Mhm.
And contacting those folks, saying you want a leg up, you
Mhm.
need some help, you're trying to generate an audience. And by the way, this is the origin of podcasts. These were open RSS feeds that when podcasts began and people just were, sharing each other's audiences, attracting each other to each other's work. And that fundamentally hasn't changed
Mhm.
because that's in the DNA of this medium.
Mhm.
So, you know, all the more reason I said that Shakespeare actually had real potential because you were going to find a literary crowd. You were going to find all these different niches within that niche, right? Folks who appreciate great actors, folks who appreciate great writing, folks who appreciate, you know, the any number, all of the themes that Shakespeare writes about. Those are
Mhm.
relevant today. So, the most effective way we found, I mean, I think the most effective way is through what we call feed drops and feed swaps. So,
Mhm.
every podcast has a feed, and you want to find the folks that have some sort of affinity with whatever your podcast is.
Mhm.
In your case, Hassiem, it's actors talking about their instrument. Well, that is a huge, wide open range, right? Because every actor has been in a show of
Yeah.
some type. There is an audience for that person somewhere,
Yeah.
and you can people that like a film or a television series that actor is in, or you know, uh, w- people that like theater, people that like plays, people that
Mhm.
appreciate storytelling in some way. And for us, Shakespeare, part of why I knew this would work is there's a huge range of affinity out there for Shakespeare's stories. There are all the actors that love Shakespeare and all their followers and fans. There are all the scholars and literary people. There are all the high school and college students who have to read these plays,
Yeah.
right? And then there's the podcast audience, that core podcast audience itself that loves a great yarn, a great story, some epic story, that's got depth and dimension, and Shakespeare has it all. You could even go sci-fi with some of Shakespeare's stuff. So,
Yeah, yeah.
there's horror, there's all these things. So finding those podcasts and identifying them and then reaching out to them and saying, "Hey, I have this series I'm trying to get off the ground or I'm trying to build an audience for, and I think our audiences will have a lot in common. Can I drop an episode of our series into your feed?" And then if you go
Mm.
the next route and do a feed swap and they do the same in exchange, right? And I love that. It's a straight up barter, right?
Yeah.
I give
And
you
that's
this, you give me that.
something I hadn't even considered.
Yeah.
Like, that's so smart.
Yeah, it really builds an audience. And there are companies out there. There's this company we've worked with a ton called Tink Media. Can't recommend them highly enough.
Mhm.
Just a great group of folks that we worked with for several years, and we still work with them. They helped us a ton just to identify those kindred spirits that are out there. There's a new company developing now called Swap FM that's working on this.
Okay.
Um, and learn your medium, right? Look for those shows yourself, listen to them, and make a choice. You don't want to just make friends with just anybody because
Sure.
you don't want to
Yeah.
diminish your brand with something objectionable or something that you don't believe in.
No, absolutely.
But
Now, so that's a part of like finding the audience, building the audience. When it comes to the content itself, somebody might be saying like, oh, I'm trying everything. My career's not taking off. Shoot, maybe I should try a podcast, but what the hell do I make a podcast about?
mm,
Um, and I think maybe this relates more to your scripted fiction, potentially. How do you select content that you feel is going to break through, is going to cut through the saturation of the market? Because ultimately, I mean, we all have a bajillion ideas, but how do we identify the one that's going to be the thing?
wow, that is a really tough one. I'm still working on that myself. Let me tell you. You've got the proven writer in Shakespeare, so that was kind of a no-brainer. It's like, yeah,
Sure.
but it's a very intuitive thing. It's I listen to and read a lot of pitches. And first of all, we're limited in terms of resources. We're not one of those companies that can just point and shoot like some of these huge,
Sure.
companies, Q Code or Wondery or any of them. But with our limited resources, the one of the original IP for intellectual property, one of the original properties that we took a chance on, it was I did it out of really because it was the origin of my work in scripted and podcasts. That guy that I mentioned, Kevin Henderson, who had written a podcast and said, "Yeah, I don't have a two-hander play for you and Tony Dalton to do, but I've got this podcast series and I want to do it," and took it
Mhm.
over to Jeremiah, and it wasn't until we got launched with the Play On podcasts and we're able to go a little bit revenue positive that I was able to say, "Okay, Kevin, now we can do this," right? But
Mhm.
that series was incredibly well written, really funny, and, because I do listen to podcasts, I had an idea about who we could cast in the lead role. This,
Mhm.
the guy is a born loser named Gil. That's the character, and he discovers that fate is indeed turned against him. He discovers it by going to a tarot card reading, and he ends up falling in love with this tarot card reader. Well, I had been
What could
listening to
possibly go
this.
wrong?
Yeah, right. I'd been listening to this, series as an actor, which, I'd love for you to hear if you haven't heard it already. It's
Mhm.
called Dead Eyes, and it's,
Dead eyes.
yeah, it's, created by Connor Ratliff, who is a comedian and actor, and, he had been hired to be in Band of Brothers, and then he got fired. He got let
Oof.
go, and he couldn't figure it out why and somebody told him, the casting directors or something, his agent said, the casting director said, "You have dead eyes," or Tom Hanks said, "You have dead eyes." And he went into
Gee,
this
thanks.
he went into a death spiral as an artist. This is such
Mm.
an inspiring story because, it plays into just what you do, Hassiem, with your podcast, and, here's an actor who couldn't have gotten a tougher blow. I mean, we all get tough blows as theater artists and actors and
Yeah.
whatnot, but imagine you've been cast in a dream project, the biggest project of its time, a Band of Brothers. Steven Spielberg producing, Tom Hanks, producing, great directors, great actors, all of whom became, kind of, got their own careers started off of this thing, and he got
Yeah.
fired. So he went through a 10-year swing of just sadness, depression, trying to make things work, doing commercials,
Yeah.
and then he started a podcast, and it is called One Man's Quest to understand why he was fired from Band of Brothers. And in the journey, this thing has won every award. It's won the
Oh,
Webby, it was,
man.
a huge series.
Uh-huh. I'm
But
gonna check
in
this
this
out.
three season journey, he interviews all of these people he's known along his path. comedians and famous people. John Hamm's one of them, Seth Rogen. He interviews them in this quest to try to get to Tom Hanks to ask him, why'd you fire me? So I knew he would be a great guy to play the lead in this series. It was podcasts. He had a podcast audience himself. Sure enough, we were able to get to him. Sure enough, he read the script and he liked it. He knew it was right for him. And so, Connor Ratliff stars in that. So these are intuitive choices. There's no recipe for it.
Sure.
I think the one thing that I would say that works in telling a story is authenticity. And that is such a broad thing to say. But if somebody has a very personal, truthful story that comes from the heart, that has some relevance, that's not clearly just about making a buck. There's something in it. There is something in that. It's in other words, if it's not a thing to get to a thing, but
Sure.
if it's something that we hear and we go, I want to know more. We want to see the car accident on the pass when we're driving. We want when we talk to each other, we try to get to the origin of who we are, right? Whether we're talking to a couple that we like, how did you meet? We want to know that story. So that's what I look for, is the sort of the personal connection. Is there something in this that is truthful feeling that I want to know more about? And, limited series are really, really hard to promote because they're short. So I look for something that's got legs, that's got, oh, okay, this is a limited series, but there may be another season we could do after this.
Sure. Yeah, because you want to maintain that audience and carry them through and keep them in rotation, so to speak.
Exactly. What's going to keep people coming back?
Yeah.
Is there good bonus content that we can create out of this? Is there, I'm a big fan of anthology series for this reason, something that you think is coming to an end, but then it keeps going. Severance as a television show is great at that, right?
Nice.
Where is this going? How do we get to the bottom of this, right?
Yeah.
So those kinds of things.
I think that's awesome. And I think it's cool, it's like there's no right answer,
Yeah.
You said, like, is it compelling? Is it authentic? For no other reason, whether it becomes successful or not, like, that's probably a worthwhile pursuit. With this show, like when I started it, like the idea of like monetizing literally wasn't in my head. It was purely like similar to Dead Eyes. It was like, why don't we know more about the industry in which we're existing? Why is there so much mystery around being an actor? Why has nobody put together a roadmap yet? Like, there's been millions of actors who've done really great, and certainly thousands upon tens of thousands who've had successful careers, and certainly could provide some advice to help others along their way. And that's really why it was born.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
Thank you. I've got a couple of rapid fire questions for you.
Go ahead.
Okay, if somebody wanted to start a podcast tomorrow, what is one piece of advice you'd give them?
Stay with it.
Heard.
Don't just try to do one and done. And be dedicated to it. You cannot do this unless you absolutely have, like you've done, Hassiem. You've got something dropping regularly at the same time, every week, same day, every week. You need that cadence. You cannot just say, I'm going to do a podcast and then try it and then walk away.
Great advice. What is the most challenging aspect of running a podcast?
Keeping everybody happy, giving everything, making it right for everybody. For me personally, the part that I don't look forward to the most, but that I feel most gratified by the time we get through it, is the dialogue editing phase, just because it's a real slog. We spend about an hour on every 5 minutes of content, just combing through it, making sure we got the best take, if somebody drops a word in a line, we go into alternate takes to dig out that word, or if there's a glitch on somebody's line, or we just feel like, there was another take in there that I know had a little bit more of a ring of truth to it. That's a
Yeah.
really hard slog, but it's a very directorial kind of thing to do. You
Yeah,
can
it's
sit
creative.
there. Yeah, it feels very creative. And I always love, once I'm in the soup, I love it. It's hard to get into it because,
Mhm.
you got to give up that time. But
Yeah, yeah.
once I'm in there, I'm like, it really makes me appreciate everybody's work.
Nice, nice. And that I'll quickly, before I ask you my last rapid fire, which is, I'll just quickly say, working on Timon of Athens, and I've been doing a few like audiobooks lately. It is just like a whole other world of storytelling that I've just come to love. It's like when you're in the booth, I've been telling people, I'm like, it's like being in your bathroom in the mirror. Like
Yeah.
just do it like you're in a booth, but like nobody can see you. There's no
Hmm.
eyes on like all of for me, my experience, all that pressure that I have on stage or on set just goes away. And I'm
Yeah.
just having fun and I'm getting feedback in real time. So like you said, like, and you're so good at this, Michael, when you're directing, it's like, if there's something you feel like we could do that better, you're like, cool, we have that. Can we do it another way? Like, let's just get another thing. And I'm just a fan of that process.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
okay. What revenue sources are available to podcasters?
Well, that's a good one. I would say that the burgeoning best shot now, strangely enough, is YouTube. You would never think this, but YouTube is now the number one place to get podcasts.
Mm,
It's not a visual medium, podcasts, and yet
right.
people listen to podcasts on YouTube. And let's face it, there's a ton of money in YouTube. Mr. Beast found that out, right? All these huge YouTube
Mm,
stars, they tinkered with the algorithm. They figured out how to make themselves discoverable. And if you can get a cup in that torrent of money that is in that waterfall,
hmm.
then you'll start seeing some revenue positive turn on what you're doing. So I
Heard.
would not ignore. In fact, I would prioritize YouTube as a way to get a fraction of a penny out of your production costs.
Love it.
And once you hit those numbers, the painful truth is that you're not going to see real revenue until you're in, several 100,000 downloads per episode.
Yeah.
And so I would just say, be patient. I talk about podcasts as gardens. You know, you
Mm,
plant a seed, you tend to it, you have to be patient. You got to weed at things out, right?
yeah.
You got to be careful, you got to curate, got to protect, and you got to give it time, and you got to keep
Mm,
feeding it. You got to keep fertilizing, watering, all of that. And in a couple of years, you're going to have something that has an audience that advertisers are going to start paying attention to.
love it. And glad we're on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't
Yes.
already. All
Yes.
right, final question for you, Michael, that I ask every guest. What is your defining quality that you bring to the table as a storyteller?
Wow, that's a great question. I would say that it's my experience as an actor, honestly, that has made me a really, really good podcast producer.
Mhm.
It's been the decades that I've spent in the trenches working regional theater, working in New York, working in LA, trying to get those jobs in television and film, and not burning bridges, right? I mean, keeping those contacts alive, keeping in touch with people, and because I'm an actor, I've read a ton of scripts, right?
Mhm.
You go out on an audition, you read that play or you
Yeah.
read that episode, you read it, so you know what you're doing, what your part in it is that you're trying out for, that you're playing. And then when you're
Mhm.
working on a story, when you're working on a play, you're working out beats, right? And especially on new works, right? You're working with the playwright, and that playwright and you in collaboration with the director figuring out, what needs to be said and how do you get to the essence of a relationship. All of those things have helped me comb through and, look, if I read a script that makes me want to be in that
Yeah.
play, in that podcast, in that film, whatever, then I know it's good, right?
Right. Right.
It's good for me. It feels right, so all of those experiences as an actor and as somebody who kept studying the craft even after graduating from grad school, I kept at it and kept learning, and meeting folks along the way. That has all really, really helped me, uh, do good work now, with these Shakespeare podcasts and with the original content that we're producing. I hope
Amazing.
that's a good enough answer.
I think it's great, man, because I had a teacher in high school who had this saying. He said, "Any spoke will do."
Mhm.
It's like on a bicycle tire, there's spokes, and there's like 100 spokes. They all lead to the center.
Yeah.
And I'm just such a like the old model of go to drama school, get an agent, audition, book a life-changing role, maybe not even a life-changing role, book a series of roles that can sustain yourself, which is maybe even harder. um, that old model is, if it's not gone already, it's phasing out
Oh,
quickly.
yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm always a huge proponent of people like yourself who have found another spoke to get to that same hub. You're a storyteller. You're telling
Yeah.
stories. And
Yeah.
ultimately, that's probably why all of us got into this to begin with. You're telling stories. You're supporting yourself. You got a couple of kids. You're making a living. I genuinely can't tell you how much respect I have for that, and that's where your career's at. So
I
thank you.
appreciate it, and I would also say I'd add to that, like, every actor, every artist has to do survival jobs to get through, right?
Yeah.
Especially in the beginning, once you're established, hopefully you're able to do it all either with just acting or whatever it happens to be, but don't overlook those survival jobs as ways to stimulate your storytelling powers, right? Write about your experiences if you've got even the beginning of a skill for writing. You know,
Yeah.
record it somehow in your mind. Maybe it's through a podcast. You know, those folks that I worked with when I was a waiter, when I was a bartender, they in places like New York and Los Angeles where I worked in those jobs, the people in those services jobs have come from all over the world, have come from incredibly challenging circumstances, a lot of them. They're characters. They are
Yeah.
characters in your
Yeah.
journey, in your story. Cultivate those stories. Let it generate empathy in you. Let it inform those roles that you're probably going to play at some point similar to
Absolutely.
their experiences, and let it open up those channels of understanding in you, and that'll all come to some sort of fruition down the line.
Whoo! Well, I can't think of a better way to wrap this thing up. Man, Michael, thank you so much for the insight. Thank you for the wisdom. Thank you for being so transparent, and for really showing us that any spoke will do. Uh,
Mhm.
Folks who are listening at home, thank you so much for tapping into this episode of The Actor's Instrument. Be sure to check out Next Chapter Podcast. They have a ton of content there, so please give them a listen. If you enjoyed this conversation with Michael, then you'll love a recent conversation I had with another Play On Podcast actor, Jason Kravitz. So be sure to check that out. Again, thanks for tapping into this episode. Wherever you're listening, please give us a like, follow, or subscribe, and we'll be back next Tuesday. Till next time, y'all. Peace.